Welcome into the Blurred Wire. Today we are continuing that theme of fixing the Multiverse Saga. Because again, we're not saying the Multiverse Saga sucks. There's actually been some really great projects, and this is one that we're going to talk about. One that we both thoroughly enjoyed and thought, I'm pretty sure it's the best, it's definitely the best TV show that Marvel's done in this whole Multiverse Saga since their Disney Plus TV shows have started coming out.
This is what tricked everybody into thinking that the saga would be great and coherent and wonderful and glorious.
Right. Right. That's actually a very accurate way to describe it. And, you know, it makes sense because the main character is the god of mischief, trickster god. Because, of course, we're
Oh,
talking
you know
about
what? True. If you
Loki.
think of Loki as just a prank on the MCU fans, I feel like it gives a you know what? Fair enough.
It makes too much
I
sense,
see what you did
actually.
there, Feige.
Clever one, Feige. Good one, Feige. So we're talking about Loki. And if I could just, I got to make this preface statement beforehand. We are going to end up changing it, but the things that we're changing aren't necessarily going to make the Loki TV show better. They just make the rest of the MCU multiverse saga that it connects to better. Like if it
I
was
wouldn't
up
even
to
say
me,
that. Yeah, I
go
wouldn't even say
ahead.
that we're changing it. I say that we're tweaking it. Just
Yeah, it's
a
probably
little
more of a
tweak.
tweak. Yeah. I want it to be very clear that I thought the show was excellent, best thing that the MCU has done TV show wise. And it probably, when all the ones were coming out, it was one with my lowest expectations. Because I was like, how are you going to do a whole show about Loki? To me, it just was about chasing how great Tom Hiddleston was as Loki. And I'm like, to me, his story ended in Infinity War. It's like, there's no reason to continue this. But they did a great job. You know, to me, like they did a great job with the
Yeah.
character that I thought whose story had naturally come to an
And
end.
and honestly, I feel like this is what all of the shows should have been, just
Hmm.
because of the zaniness of it. Because the comics get crazy, like absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And so if you keep the movies kind of a bit more grounded, because that's what everybody's watching, and you just make the shows just do the craziest stuff, all the crazy comics that the diehard fans want to see, then that seems like a good balance because most of the shows are being watched by the diehard fans. Like your casuals aren't keeping up with, and that's why a lot of this stuff is getting lost on them because when you make a boring show that even the diehard fans are getting bored of, then
Yeah. Then you've lost everything. So a lot of comic nods. So we'll just dive right into it. So Loki, of course, takes place at the end of it takes place right after Avengers Endgame because when Tony Stark is trying to get the Tesseract, Hulk ends up messing everything up, and Loki is able to escape with the Tesseract. And
yeah, I
so,
mean
of
technically
course,
Loki takes place after Avengers 1, kind of.
uh,
I mean, the movie takes place after Avengers Endgame, but the timeline is right after the events of Avengers 1 for
yeah,
this
it's the
Loki.
Loki from Avengers 1, yeah. But technically it's happening after all the stuff that happened in Endgame
Endgame.
or
I
in
guess
Infinity War
I
in
guess
the middle of Endgame.
time is irrelevant to this series,
Yeah,
kind of.
because by the time Loki like escapes, he gets immediately taken to somewhere outside of time.
Yeah.
So it's like it kind of doesn't really matter. So which is exactly the next part. Loki gets taken to the TVA with the technology, and he's like, and I really love that scene because he's like, I am a god. And they're like, so sign here, this is everything that you said. And he's like still trying to exalt his Loki status, I guess you could say.
Yeah, when he threatens one of the TVA agents and says, Give me that Tesseract," and he's like, "Here you go," and then he opens his drawer and there's Infinity Stones in there, and he's like, "Yeah,
Right.
there's like a paperweight. We got a million of these."
My favorite part was when in that scene where he was trying to escape and he was like, give me the Tesseract or I'll gut you like a fish. And he was like, ah, what's a fish?
Give me the Tesseract or I'll gut you like a fish, Casey.
What's a fish? What's a fish?
So funny. It was perfect. Like that's who we've been missing from a lot of this. So anyway, Loki gets captured by the TVA, and that's when Mobius, who I actually thought, my wife hates Owen Wilson. She hasn't really
Oh,
explained why. She
oh
just took so into
wow,
mind.
wow.
Oh, maybe that's why.
She didn't grow up
She
watching
hates
Night
him.
at the Museum like we did.
Yeah. She's like, I think she'll refuse to watch that movie just because he's in it. But she still loves this show, and she actually liked Owen Wilson's character in it, which just shows how good it is. Because if you don't like Owen Wilson, it's very hard to not see Owen Wilson in everything he does. You know what I
Honestly, yeah.
mean?
And to be fair, I didn't like the Mobius character to be, although, okay. Mobius wasn't a cowboy, and that's kind of all he does. So that's
Yeah,
probably why I didn't see him in it.
that's true. But almost he did a good job falling into the role of Mobius
Yeah,
and not just like playing himself. So yeah, so in the first season, Loki gets captured, and that's when um Mobius reveals that, hey, we're going to use Loki to catch this other variant who's been killing our Minutemen, which I also thought was a clever name for the TVA. So then Loki's going to go on this journey with Mobius to try to um,
Sylvie.
capture Sylvie, right? The Loki variant who's been
Yeah,
killing the Minutemen. And I even like the idea where he was like, we're hiding, like I can like where Loki figures out that she's hiding in apocalypses
yeah,
because in apocalyptic events, it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to cause a branch
because it's
because
all
the
gonna get
world is
wiped in a
ending.
second. Yep, it's all gonna get
Right,
wiped in a
right.
second anyway.
So it doesn't really matter. And I also didn't realize we'll talk about a little bit more as we get to the end. So at that point now so then they find the Loki, and then of course Loki, still being Loki stuff, decides to betray the TVA, runs off with Sylvie. They end up on Lamentus. And Lamentus is probably one of the best episodes of the whole series. Just watching Loki and Sylvie get to know each other and actually build chemistry.
That's another thing that
Um,
these shows can take the time to do that I feel like they kind of don't, is to dig in, is like to have the time to just sit and let the characters, like that's also what helped about it being a Loki show, that it took the Loki from the Avengers timeline, from the Avengers
mhm,
1, because it was a little weird. It was like, well, we got all this character development with Loki and now it's been lost. But the show, because it had a show's runtime, it was able to really build that back up with episodes
mhm.
like Lamentus.
And I admit, because they like in the TVA when Loki was in the room and Mobius was showing him his future, how like your mom, because Loki's mom dying, like as bad as Thor: The Dark World is, the death of Loki's mom, I feel like is what changed him the most and changed his path,
Yeah.
because he actually really loved her. And she actually was the only person who really cared for him. And if we got some more of that, that would have been nice.
It's almost like when Loki
Specifically in the
started
Dark
taking
World.
it's almost like when Loki started taking things seriously. He's
Yeah.
like,
Or
you know,
started looking at it from not so much of a victim, I'm always right perspective, of more of like, man, what did my mom like raise me to be, want me to be? Like it just, you
yeah.
could see that shift. And even though he still did, evil things, like I feel like that was that was the first start in his shift towards his development. And of course, showing it to him on the screen is not the same as him experiencing it. So like they kind of tried to like give him all that development that we had in those
Yeah.
movies by
But like,
showing it to him.
yeah.
And so it kind of worked, kind of didn't,
But
but
like I said, we got more of that in the rest of the show, where he just actually got to,
right. And it's one of those things, like as a diehard
I
MCU
know.
fan, we're not really going to be like, oh, Loki's character isn't this developed, because technically all the development hasn't really happened. We're just going to appreciate this is where Loki kind of is right now. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
end up taking away from the show. So now we're at the Nexus event. And that's because Loki and Sylvie. Now that part was never really explained as much in the show, how Loki and Sylvie falling in love with each other created a Nexus event, even though it was in an apocalypse. I guess that in and of itself is just exactly what happened. Like you don't really need to look too much deeper into it. But the fact that they created a show where Loki could fall in love with himself is perfect.
By the yeah,
Absolutely
I
perfect.
love that, because it's like,
Yeah.
it's the idea that he's such a narcissist. You could only love yourself, and
Right.
well, yeah, that's what ended up happening.
And that narcissism leads him to be so selfless by the time we get to the end. Because he's not like, by the time he gets to the end, all he cares about is Sylvie, but that's still him. So all he cares about is still himself, but he still cares about another person.
It's like, again, like shows like this, it shows like these are people who care about these characters and really
Mm-hmm.
know them in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we didn't get that through. But again, Loki. Let's focus on Loki.
Yeah. Yeah, we could talk about what we didn't get. So the Nexus event, that episode is where Sylvie and Loki are brought back to the TVA. Then of course they prune Loki, and then Sylvie ends up pruning herself, and that's when they wake up in the void and they see all these Lokis. Now that's, and again, this is the part where like again, I still loved it because we're exploring Loki's character, but it's like the chances of landing in the void and like the only thing that's left are Lokis. And I guess Lokis are like built to survive and all that stuff, but it's still kind of like it feels like this void only exists in Loki's world. Like, especially now that we've seen Deadpool and Wolverine, like that void almost feels completely different than the one that we saw in Loki.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
mean, if you had to change anything, you could say, well, they sent them to a part of the void where all the Lokis go.
yeah, maybe something like that. Something
If
like
you
if
want like
I'm
an explanation for it,
yeah,
like I don't know.
if I'm gonna use the void again, I guess basically is what I'm saying. I'm gonna make a stronger reason in Loki as to why there's only Lokis there. Because to me, them just saying like the Lokis, we just survive and everything else dies is not really strong enough
Especially when one of them is a
for that.
child.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when one of them, yeah. So that would be my only thing I would do. So yeah, maybe some line of like this is where the Lokis go, or like, in the void you end up next to other things like you that have been pruned
Yeah, your
until
essence
you
brings you
eventually get
to
eaten by Alioth.
yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's just kind of the natural order because again, Sylvie appeared right there too when she got pruned, so it all kind of makes sense.
And that could even help with
Um,
Deadpool because that's how he got close to what was he called? Fun pool? Cool pool?
oh, nice pool.
Nice pool,
The
thank you.
proposal. Oh, sorry, major Deadpool and Wolverines. Well, that's not that
Yeah.
big of a Deadpool and Wolverine spoiler, but we'll get there. We're gonna go all the way to Secret Wars, so we will cover Deadpool and Wolverine. So anyway, back to Loki. So then they get to the part, and again, I love the fact that they use the illusion to trick Alioth, and then I love that Sylvie's
Yeah,
powers.
and they have the classic Loki, the old Loki showing Loki like look how much power we truly have.
Hmm.
And the
And
glorious purpose line as he's getting that
yeah,
that
oh
hits, that
yes.
hits.
And he's like, yeah. And he's got the
Glorious
classic,
purpose.
yeah. And
And
the
he
way
has
he's
the
laughing all
big
crazy.
horns. Yeah.
And by getting different actors to play the Loki variants, that sets up Spider-Man No Way Home very, very well.
Yeah.
Especially because, I mean, you have Sylvie, right? But because not every variant, like, and having some variants that look the same, because there's a Loki variant that's played by Tom Hiddleston. And then there's just a black Loki variant that's like, why is he black? I don't know. But
And
it
like
just
one of
shows
the
that, like,
one of Loki's was it a dog, a crocodile?
yeah, it was a crocodile. And it literally bit some guy's arm off. And it just kind of shows because I think that's the thing that people didn't really like about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Because again, like, you have variants, but all the variants were played by the same characters, same actors. So it kind of just made it seem like Benedict Cumberbatch played every single one of his variants. Carl Mordo was the same variant. So like, and again, it's not like every person has to be different,
It's just that's
but
boring. That's boring. If you're gonna do
yeah.
multiverse, you need to have. I want. I wouldn't say have some fun with it. Have all of the fun with it. Do all kinds of crazy stuff.
And I mean, the Reed Richards showing up was cool, and
Yeah.
again, we'll get to Multiverse of Madness.
Until he became what, soup spaghetti.
Yeah, what a waste. Anyway, so, um, and I was telling this the other day. I feel like the Thor series could have benefited like back in the Infinity Saga. Like, I really like the character of Amora, the Enchantress, who's actually very
Oh.
close with Surtur, who's the Executioner, and she plays a huge role in the comics and in Avenger storylines, and they just don't really use her at all. And so I feel like with Sylvie, they kind of brought Amora in, because her powers are very similar to
Yeah.
Amora, Enchantress being able to enchant. So like I feel like first we're probably never gonna get Amora the Enchantress because we have Sylvie, right? But I'm okay with Sylvie playing that like Enchantress role throughout the if she ever comes back and if we ever see her again. I would have even been cool if they said her name was Amora, or like in another world I was called Amora and I named myself Sylvie to get away from that
They
or
could
something.
just
It would have
call
been
it
a cool
that.
nod
Yeah.
to
Like
comics.
this
Yeah.
Sylvie variant is the enchantress of whatever. Yeah. No.
It would have been a cool
Because
nod
I
to
mean,
comic fans, but again,
her powers are pretty close to Loki's off the rip, right?
yeah, but like I said, Loki can't enchant. He can't that's why like even in Avengers, like he used the Mind Stone to take over people's minds, but he can't do that himself. So that's why
Oh,
it was cool that that was something that Sylvie could do, because again, that was an enchantress thing.
okay. All this
Um,
to say, the way that Loki handled the multiverse was much appreciated. A
mhm.
lot more zany and wackier than just like, oh, it's just another version of the same guy.
Oh yeah. And Loki is actually, it's the only TV show, I'm pretty sure, besides it and Miss Marvel, and maybe Moon Knight, but I've watched season 1 of Loki like at least 2 or 3 times. And it's the only show that made me want to be like, you know what, I'm gonna go watch Loki again. Because it's just that gripping and it feels like an actual TV
And
show.
it's that's something that because I mean it's fun to have. It's okay to have like a silly like a little what would you even call She-Hulk? A rom-com?
Oh, comedy. I can't call it a comedy because comedies are funny.
Okay, William.
That's the
Co
problem.
Humor is subjective. Okay, but okay. Any
Right.
Loki is a like a thriller mystery. Stories like those always want you to go back for more, but especially because once you've seen the ending, and you know that there's that everything was leading, especially Loki season 2, but we'll get there. The details lead up to that grand ending, and you're like, now that I know the breadcrumbs, let me go look. But it's if you watch any mystery,
Hmm.
you always want to go back and like see it again after knowing the ending to try to put the mystery together ahead of time and see all the details. Have a reason to do that with
Hmm.
when it's like just like a comedy. By the way, all this to say, Loki has not changed at all. We
Yeah.
love Loki, and all this is exactly the same. We're finally starting to getting some basic. Our little tweak is coming up now.
Yeah, exactly. And you could tell, like, if you watched any of our other videos, like the way that we've had to go in depth because the changes that we made, like change each like little intricate plot thing. But with Loki, it literally just sails all the way. Like we've covered the entire plot in like maybe 10 minutes or so. And now we're here at pretty much at the only change that's going to end up being more impactful to the rest of the MCU than it is going to be to this series,
Yeah,
actually. So yeah, so they meet Kang, aka He Who Remains,
yeah.
and he explains to them that there was a multiversal war. And this is where we would make that change. It's in the multiversal war. So, first of all, we keep the same storyline that Nathaniel Richards is the only person, the first person in the 31st century to discover that there are universes on top of his own, as well as how to travel between them, right? He's the first person to discover that, 31st century. So, then he explains that like some of them, like he said, some of them were scientists and they would like trade information and resources. Other of them, other versions of them only saw, or no, what we would say is one version, however, wasn't so benevolent and saw these universes as worlds to conquer, right? So like in all these other universes, usually Nathaniel Richards, aka He Who Remains, is a scientist who's pretty benevolent. You know, he's not necessarily like he's not Captain America or anything like that, but he's a good guy, right? And except there's in one universe, he's a tyrannical conqueror, Kang the Conqueror. And that version of Kang has conquered his entire universe. And when he discovers there are other universes, well, he decides he's going to conquer the multiverse. So He Who Remains explains that this Kang waged war in the entire multiverse, conquering each one as he went. And every time he died, like every time a universe would be strong enough to kill him, and he could even mention, like, you know, sometimes some universes the Avengers stood up against him, some universes the Nova Corps were able to defeat him, the Guardians of the Galaxy even defeated him. One time, Adam Warlock snapped his neck. He could name all the ways that he's died, but he continued to just come back as a different version and continue his conquest. And I don't know if we'd show like clips of it, like that's kind of that would be kind of be up to Marvel, but it would be like, okay, it was Kang, and then he comes back as Rama Tut, and then he comes back as Scarlet Centurion. And because he figured out how to master time while conquering the multiverse, they couldn't ever defeat him because every time they killed him, he would return in a new form.
I want to think about the funniest person to have killed Kang, but I couldn't come up with it fast enough.
Squirrel Girl. I mean, that was that,
This is why we're teammates. Yeah, there's one universe where even the Squirrel Girl defeated Kang.
right. A squirrel literally
Isn't
choked him to death.
isn't her thing that she's that she wins every fight or whatever? What's her?
She beat Thanos.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
pop
with
off,
the
Queen.
Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh,
Yeah,
pop off, Queen.
that's a character I won't be upset if she doesn't end up making it to the
Oh,
MCU. Ooh, what a shame.
anywho,
So, so yeah, he describes all the ways that he's died and all the way that he continues to come back. So then he explained, so me realizing that he's like, so I was the only king who discovered that he was getting his power from all these timelines that he was created. He literally found a way to harness the power of timelines, and that's why he was able to return, come back, not really die, and he was the only one who had this technology. He's the only one who figured it out. So he was able to return without dying, and it gave him immense power because he's literally getting his power from the timeline, and he's using that power to control time and defeat anyone he comes against. Like, imagine Thor speed blitzing him, and he literally just slows him down and watches as Mjolnir like harmlessly passes by him. And he's like,
Or Thor speed blitzes and kills Kang, but then Kang appears 5 seconds ago and kills Thor before he even thought of Kang. And it's like,
right, right. And that's how they explain you can't kill him. So then he's like, so he who remains is a Kang who discovered Alioth. All the traveling, same explanation for how Alioth came to be, because I thought that was brilliant as well. Because I was also like, so what? This being that just eats time and space is just existing out there? And it's like, no, Alioth came into existence because of all the tears in space. All the tears in space and time eventually forged into this creature called Alioth, which again, excellent explanation. So Kang, he was like, I discovered Alioth. You know, again, he weaponized it just like in the show, and he used it to create the TVA. Because again, if you notice, the TVA, all their weapons are based off of Alioth and the Void.
yeah.
So he discovers the Void, he discovers Alioth and the Void, um, and he realizes that in order to stop Kang, we have to stop all the timelines from existing.
We have to cut off his power source, which
We
is
have to
all
cut
the
off
other
his power
timelines.
source, which is every single power line, every single timeline.
Timeline.
So, so he forms the TVA to fight against Kang and destroy every single timeline. And then once they get down to the sacred timeline, again, because Kang can still return, he has to banish him, or I guess he should banish him. He's like, we had to send him to a world without time. So I guess let's say they tricked him into going into a world without time, the quantum realm
Yeah,
first.
they could just leave it there. Just say we tricked him into a world without time, and then we pruned all the timelines so
So he
so he
couldn't
would have no
escape.
power to escape.
Exactly. Right. So, and he doesn't have to explain what that, like, we could even think in
I
Loki
would leave
that
it
he's
open
talking
ended,
about the
yeah.
void. Yeah, we could think that he's talking about the void and be like, but he wasn't in the void. And that's when Sylvie just tries to kill him. You know what I mean? So it'd be like, yeah, we tricked him into a space without time. And then to prevent his escape, destroyed all the other timelines and kept one. And he's like,
All
and
this to
now I
say,
keep the order.
yeah, so the main difference is instead of it being an endless volley of Kangs, because it kind of loses the focus of the main villain when like there's an infinite number of them. You know what I mean? So there's this one Kang, the Kang Prime, let's call him. And he is the one who, like, whenever the multiversal war happens, he takes over and conquers everything. So they set up the TVA to he because he was powering himself with all these multiple timelines. So they tricked him into the world without time in quotes, and they used the TVA to prune all the other timelines. So now he's trapped there because he has no other power source.
Exactly. And that's how, and then so, and he's like, by killing me, he's like, I'm the only one that knows which timelines are going to lead to other timelines and how to stop them. So by killing me, you'll just be seeing myself in a very different light. And so basically he's warning him like, yeah, he's going to escape and it's going to cause chaos. So yeah, instead of saying like like an infinite number of versions of me are going to, he's going to be like, the worst version of me is going to come. You might think
Yeah.
I'm the devil. You might think I'm a demon. He could say like, you might think I'm a demon, but wait till you meet the devil. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Oh,
okay. Off the dome with that one. Okay.
thank you very much. I know it was off the dome. So yeah, and that's how you could explain it. And again, we still have that emotional fight scene between Loki and Sylvie. I love the part where he says, like, all I know is I just want you to be okay. Like that pulls the entire storyline together because Loki is finally caring about someone other than himself, except it's still
It is
himself.
himself.
And it's brilliant.
That's great.
So Yeah, that's how we. So then when Loki, so did we decide when Loki gets back to the TVA after Sylvie kills He Who Remains? Are we saying, are we gonna have that same statue of Kang and like have Loki unsure of what's going on? I think that goes more into Loki season 2,
I
where
would say if
Mobius is like, "Who
anything,
are you?"
when he gets back, I would just make it be rumbling and falling apart.
Okay.
Because the whole idea is what without He Who Remains Kang to hold back Kang Prime, timelines will start to appear that will start to power up He Who Remains energy, and he'll be able to start to escape. So that's him escaping. Is he's going to come up through the TVA, so it starts to rumble. So Loki comes back, and then yes, well, I mean, we can still have
Well, actually, because I think what happened in the scene that we saw at the end of Loki, major spoilers for Loki season 2, and I don't want to, we're not going to get into Loki season 2, but I think the scene that ended at when you ended Loki season 1, Loki was time slipping. So he slipped into a time of the TVA before they had even met him. Because I think that's why he escaped from the void, because that's when he started time slipping, because they added that in. And so for this ending scene, which I think we're going to keep for Loki season 2, we haven't really
okay.
like decided yet. But so he would still appear and be like, "Who are you? What's your badge number?" You know, like, "I don't know
Yeah.
who you are, Mobius." And that's because Loki's really in the past,
Okay,
even though
that
all this
works.
is happening around him. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah, so again,
yeah.
all this to say, the main thing is there's not a million Kangs, there's only two Kangs. There's He Who Remains and there's Kang Prime.
Mm-hmm.
Kang Prime is the Conqueror. He Who Remains pruned all the timelines to keep Kang Prime at bay. By Sylvie, by taking out He Who Remains, it will bring back our singular villain, Kang, to start to make his escape.
And again, the way that we explain it is because there is a Nathaniel Richards, because again, you can use that instead of like, you could say that all these different, that He Who Remains is Nathaniel Richards and Kang is just the worst version of Nathaniel Richards.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so exactly, so there's lots of Nathaniel Richards out there. There's only one Kang, there's
There's
only
only one
one
Kang.
Conqueror.
That works.
And every time every time he gets killed, he comes back as a different version of the same Kang, because he travels throughout time to figure out how he's going to die, and then he returns in a different way. So like he returns as Ramatut to stop his death because he went to Egypt for a while to figure out who was about to kill him and how he was going to stop it. And then he went back, and that's why he was Kang the Conqueror. And then when Thor's hammer like sliced past him and then he died, it's because Ramatut was there and killed him. You know what I mean? Like that's how that progression would go.
And when Squirrel Girl's claws dug into his neck and ripped out his spleen, it was he went back in time and said, maybe don't fight Squirrel Girl. I'll just avoid her
I'll
because she
just
can't
avoid
be
her.
defeated. Yeah,
Yeah. As it
I
turns
cannot
out,
stop
yeah.
her.
He's like fighting
Clearly,
her. It just gets too nutty.
I die. I okay. The other line was good. This
This was
one,
not so much.
not
Okay.
so much.
You
Not so
said
much.
make the multiverse more crazy and zany. Like this goes right with it.
This goes right with it.
Okay. I went a little too far now. I admit it. I'm sorry, guys. If that means you stop listening to us after this, I take that on. That's fully
Yeah, I
my fault.
respect that decision, frankly.
I can understand that. So let us know your thoughts if you think this change would be good. Like you said, not a huge one, just mainly instead of all the Kangs are the villain, there's one Kang who's the villain, and he's the
Yeah,
worst one.
it
And
just
that's
focuses.
what
It
we're
just focuses
establishing.
down the big
Yep, yep,
bad.
yep. So let us know your thoughts on Loki. Let us know your thoughts on the Multiverse Saga. And keep rocking with us. We'll see you again next time.